What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2018 award winner in the innovation category given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And you can also catch me on many different platforms. And also once a month, I host and co-produce online conversations for fathers that are co-sponsored by Dad Central and Dove Men Care. It has been a challenging time for many of us, many of our brothers and sisters, especially in North America. Recent killing of many Black men and many Black women has been amplified. There are protests going on in the streets, not only in America, but also in this country. And back on Friday, Sophia Jacob from Ottawa reached out and said, Dr. Vibe, I'm hurting. We need to have a conversation about this. Let's have a conversation about this. I said, let's do what we can and let's make it happen. So big shout out goes to Sophia and also Richard Sharp from Ottawa. Today, we're hosting this live epic event and we're going to have a great conversation today. We have some friends with us. The title of our conversation is Enough is Enough. What can be done to stop the killing of Black men and women by the police in North America? And do note, this is an international open conversation that's being watched by many people around the world. I know people in Canada, United States, England, and parts in between and outside of that are watching it. What I'm going to do is introduce each one of our friends for this great conversation. First up, we have Lesline McEwan. Lesline is a registered psychotherapist with the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario. She did her graduate degree, a master's in individual counseling at St. Paul University and the University of Ottawa, and her undergraduate degree, BA, with a double major in psychology and religion at Carleton University. Lesline is a member of the Ontario Association of Mental Health Professionals. She is a workshop, seminar facilitator, and presenter. In addition, she's a certified anger management facilitator accepted by the Children's Aid Society and the courts. Lesline, thank you so much. How are you doing this afternoon?
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Next up, this is a lady I've wanted to meet for a long time, and I guess obviously with COVID-19, I'm only going to get a chance to do the digital stuff right now, but I'm speaking one day we'll meet face to face. Elle Jones is a poet, professor, community advocate, journalist, and prison abolitionist from Halifax, Nova Scotia. She was the 5th Port Laureate of Halifax and the 15th Nancy's Chair in Women's Studies at Mount St. Vincent University. She's a co-founder of the Black Power Hour, a radio show collective with prisoners on CKDU 88.1. Elle was a 2016 recipient of the Burnley Rocky Jones Human Rights Award from the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission. Her book of poetry and essays about state violence, Canada is So Polite, will be released in the winter from Gaspereau Press. So welcome for the first time with all of us, many of us. Elle Jones, how are we?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Next up, this is a gentleman. He lives in Ottawa, but it sounds like we know each other much too well, and he's a little bit of a media star these days. Warren Clarke is a doctoral candidate in sociology with a specialization in political economy at Carleton University and the founder of the Barbershop Talk, Black Men and Misconceptions, and the Afro-Caribbean Mentorship Program, ACMP. His broad research interests are tied to youth culture, social citizenship, neoliberalism, gentrification, race and ethnicity, anti-colonialism, and masculinity. His dissertation focuses on how first and generation young Canadian, African, and Caribbean Black ACB men experience youth employment training programs in Ontario and Quebec. He has dedicated his academic and professional career in helping Afro and Caribbean Black youth overcome barriers within the likes of schools and the Ontario judicial system, which has inspired his work and research. Welcome, Mr. Warren Clarke. How we doing?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
My pleasure. Appreciate you back. And finally, but not lastly, Cesar Ndema-Moussa. Few things that he's done during his journey. Eastern Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity, Child Welfare. He's an equality expert on the City of Ottawa Police Community Equity Council and co-chair of the Anti-Racism Subcommittee, educator conferencier on racism, and discriminations in society to students, teachers, leadership trainer to senior leaders, president of Roots and Culture Canada, a Black advocacy group organization centering on racism, education, and youth crime prevention. Bonjour, Cesar.
Hello, Dr. Vibe. Bonjour, Dr. Vibe.
Bonjour, ça va?
Ça va très bien, merci. Hello, everyone, brothers and sisters. Je suis content d'être avec vous. Glad to be here with you.
Excellent. Thanks to have all of you here. And just for everyone who is watching live on Facebook or YouTube, please put your questions and comments in the comment section. All our friends will be able to either respond or comment to them, comment on them in real time. And if we have a lot of questions, we will try to answer them as much as we can. And if we can't, maybe we have to do a part 2. Just asking. So my first question to the panel, in regards to that video of last week, which some of us have seen too many times, what was your first reaction when you viewed the George Floyd video? Who would like to take that first?
I'll go first.
Let's our ladies go first.
Please.
Yeah. My first reaction was shock and disbelief. You know, I was numb for a while there. I cried because I couldn't believe I was seeing this happening in real life. It's not new, but I actually saw somebody being killed. And this was quite traumatic for me, as I'm sure it was for a lot of other people. You know, our nervous system is an electrical system. And when it gets overloaded, it shuts down. And we were bombarded with that type of violence and cruelty. And it just really hit home. And I grieve for myself. I grieved for my community. I grieve for my sons. I grieve for my grandsons. But it just left me in shock and disbelief. Yeah.
Okay. Who would like to? Warren, I think you wanted to share some too.
Yeah, and Lesline, thanks for being vulnerable. You're appreciated. You know, I share the same sentiments. You know, when I first saw it, it was another reminder that, you know, as a Black male, that, you know, I don't mean anything in the gaze of whiteness. You know, what really hurt is that we saw it from beginning to end. You know, most times when you see these videos, they don't see, or I haven't seen, maybe I just haven't been on TV enough to see it, or I'm just not aware, but, you know, just to see it transpire from a living body to dying to dead, you know, it was heartbreaking for me. And then having a moment to reflect and say, well, dang, that could be me, right? And then having to now live through that, or live with that, thereafter, even including today, right? So it's a memory that's not going to go away anytime soon, and it's a painful feeling, mentally, emotionally, just overall.
Okay, Cesar, can you do it? I'm sorry, I was wrong. I should have had you translate. So Cesar, could you translate the question and also have a response?
Alors, frères et sœurs, la question posée, qui est la première question, est tout simplement de savoir quelles ont été les réactions de chacun et chacune des panélistes par rapport à la vidéo du meurtre du frère George Floyd. Telle est la question à laquelle les panélistes répondent présentement et à laquelle vous êtes encouragés d'émettre vos commentaires dans la section écrite Live Comments.
Okay. And did you want to answer the question?
To answer the question, and je vais répondre également en français. But to answer the question, very unfortunately, I was not surprised. I am a Pan-Africanist, and my studies, notably in history, but regarding international relations, have shown to me very factually that violence knows no bound when it comes to Black bodies in terms of what has been inflicted to us since the Arab slave trade and notably the Western slave trade / triangular trade. However, we have to understand something here, and I'm going to take you on a tangent regarding police and black bodies, which is the advent of cameras that were to better control the work of police. To me, it reminded me of the progress of technology and violence, such as, for example, firearms and the cannons. Technology, such as the camera, would also permit to better see the hurt, the killing, and the psychological trauma and intergenerational traumas that are being caused to Black people, Black men, Black women, Black children, and Black communities. And where it would happen in one place with technology, you would basically have an interconnection of Black communities worldwide being able to see this is what's happening to us, this is what's being done to us, and you can no longer pretend it was either just a police misbehavior, a police action, or just a matter of training, because we have to stop this lie of always imputing it to training or to mental health, because we don't see Black cops behaving such towards white citizens, and this was an outright and deliberate murder. We have to dare call things as they are and stop this politely correct language, because if our heroes, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, just as Patrice Lumumba and Marcus Garvey, Thomas Sankara, were to come back to life today, they would be so shocked, or maybe not shocked, to see that it was just like back in the 60s, just as back in the 50s, just as back in the 1920s. So the problem is beyond even police and beyond even training. It's a matter of the very nature of what we talk in terms of white supremacy and the relations with Black bodies, Black people, but also a matter of identity and consciousness. So I was not surprised. Very unfortunately, like I understand how the words I'm saying may be a surprise to some, but no, I was not surprised, because remember, in the last 2 weeks, we saw our brother, Amo Arbery, being shot and killed by a white father and son. We saw also Brother Cooper being falsely accused by a white woman. And let's be honest about this, a Canadian white woman make a false allegation on 911, where we know so well regarding Emmett Till and so many other Black men who were falsely killed and falsely imprisoned due to false allegations. So what happened with this murderer cop, Derek Chauvin, towards our brother George Floyd was a very logical continuation of what has been going on for far too long. Si je peux dire ceci en français, à la surprise de tous, non, je n'étais absolument pas surpris, pour une raison très simple. En tant que panafricaniste, l'étude de l'histoire et des relations internationales, donc de rapports de force et de violence, montre un complet sens de désintérêt comme de valeur au corps noir depuis la traite arabo-musulmane dès le 7e siècle, et notamment la traite transatlantique des Européens chrétiens, des Blancs chrétiens envers les Noirs. Et donc, avec la venue de la technologie, que l'on regarde avec les armes à feu, telles comment la venue du canon a augmenté la violence dans les guerres, il faut aussi voir le fait que l'arrivée de la technologie, telle les caméras, a non seulement le but qui était de mieux encadrer le travail des policiers, a également permis en sorte que de mieux démontrer la violence policière envers les corps noirs, et ainsi nous unissons de par le monde au travers du fait que hommes noirs, comme femmes noires, comme enfants noirs, toutes les communautés noires peuvent se reconnaître dans l'acte meurtrier qui est arrivé, pour une raison simple. Quand on regarde les 2 dernières semaines, que l'on prenne notre frère jogger, Amo Arbery, que l'on prenne l'exemple de notre frère Cooper, avec la fausse allégation de cette femme blanche canadienne pour 911, sachant combien d'hommes noirs ont été tués et lynchés ou emprisonnés sous une fausse allégation, mais également notre sœur Breonna Taylor, on peut bel et bien voir et prouver et démontrer cet acte était volontaire, cet acte était meurtrier, et donc le problème va au-delà de la notion de police, va au-delà de la notion de formation, mais c'est un problème par rapport à cette suprématie blanche, par rapport à ces notions de complexe de supériorité et de dévalorisation de la vie noire. Et donc, malheureusement, je suis désolé de le dire, quand on regarde objectivement, il n'y a pas de quoi être surpris, il n'y a aucune surprise là-dedans, et c'est à partir de là, on doit oser agir en ce sens, car si nos héros, Martin Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey comme Sankara et Lumumba revenaient à la vie, il ne serait pas surpris de voir ce genre de choses, mais peut-être serait surpris qu'en 2020, on en parle encore.
Okay, thank you so much for your thorough answer. We haven't forgot you, El. It's your time.
Yes, I want to pick up on something Cesar said about technology, because I think, sorry, I'm going to adjust my mic and my camera. I think that's really important to think about. I did not watch the video. And this is kind of the dilemma that happens, is when we got cameras, we thought that now that we can tape these things, surely we'll get justice. And if you go back to Rodney King, he's caught on camera thrashing under the batons of the police. And a white jury is able to see his twitching body as evidence of him resisting the police, right? They're yelling, stop resisting. And as they beat his body, white people are actually able to quit those police and actually see his beaten body as evidence of a violent body. So what that told us is, even when we have this on tape, white people are still going to see through a white supremacist lens. We saw that with Philando Castile when that murder was streamed live. And yet people will still say, well, we don't know what happened before. We don't know what we said. So we know that white people, what Desmond Cole calls white supremacist improv, will always come up with some reason why we deserved it or why the tape doesn't show it. So I bring this up to say that we have this dilemma with technology where, on the one hand, when we can capture this, these things that we said for years, when we were making rap songs about like F the police and getting congressional hearings, and people couldn't understand why Black people were saying that. And then we got it on video, and now it's up in front of the whole world. But the problem with that is it still doesn't lead to justice. And now we have a constant stream of these beaten, killed, bleeding, in pain, in agony Black bodies that comes to also have a psychological effect on us as Black people. So what does it mean to constantly watch Black death? So for me, I don't need to watch the video to understand that white supremacy kills Black bodies or to honor the Black lives of being killing. And I'm not critiquing other people who did. I just made the choice not to watch this. My feeling for me is that, you know, we need to bear witness to these lives, but also we really need to talk about how we're going to organize from that. So is the Black body just a spectacle? Is it just something laid out for the white gaze to look at, or for Black people to be traumatized by? Or do we need to see Black death in terms of this organizing structure? We think of someone like Fanon, who talked a lot about Blackness and social death, but also, of course, organized his community from that. So I always ask that question. What does it affect us when we always see Black bodies in this really degraded and painful way? And how do we organize from that?
Thank you. Thank you, El. Just want to ask, Leslie, you had mentioned that you were surprised, and then Cesar said he wasn't surprised. So, Leslie, why did this video surprise you?
I was not surprised. I was just shocked. I've never seen anybody dying before, and especially in such a horrible way. Elle said she didn't watch the video. I didn't watch it to the end because I couldn't. But I was not surprised. I just was shocked to see that happening in my eyes. I mean, we've dealt with this over the years, you know. It's been going on a long time, and I don't see it anytime soon. So it wasn't a surprise, but I was shocked.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, no problem. I just want to bring up another. Actually, Elle brought up something interesting about the whole area of social media and the impact that social media has had to amplify these killings. What is everyone's thoughts on the role that social media, these things that we call smartphones, are having on this situation, good, bad, or ugly? Who would like to go at that first? Go ahead, Warren.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what we have to acknowledge as well is that right now we're living in an era through a pandemic, and we've seen social media play out these senseless killings before. And yes, there's been protests, but we've never seen a protest like this in a very long time, mind you, to this extent. And I think because there's a lot of people at home, there's a lot of people have access or have time, I should say, to view this online or view this, on their smartphone or whatnot. It's encouraging different emotions now because your mind's not occupied from your typical day-to-day routine. You're at home most of the time, or maybe all the time, because of the COVID pandemic, and now it's hitting a little bit harder. So social media has a definitely impact on how people are viewing it, but I think we definitely need to take into consideration that this pandemic has heightened everybody's emotions in different ways. But to answer the question more head on, social media could only do so much. I think we need to acknowledge that we live in a white settler colonized nation state. So regardless if we have social media or not, it's still, we still live through that white gaze and that white and the whiteness. And regardless of, if it's social media, if it's just radio, if it's newspapers, the narrative is still controlled by whiteness, and we need to acknowledge that. And something I mentioned, yesterday when I was speaking, with another reporter, one of the many, we need to, acknowledge that these policies and these ways of, capitalism is all created through whiteness. You know what I mean? So no matter what we do or how we view this information, that white settler gaze has something to do with how we respond.
Who else would like to add in regards to the whole impact of killings of Black men and women in regards to the whole aspect of social media? Who'd like to jump in?
I think the challenge that we have, so social media is a tool of communication, and we've been able to reach across the world and get these images very directly. And we can think back to, for example, Emmett Till's mother, who used a form of that kind of transmission when she left Emmett Till's coffin open and said, "I want the world to see what they did to my baby," right? So we know that this kind of visual impacts the sharing of these images, and also protest images, and the way that Black people have always used style and image and the physicality as a political tool. But I think we have to also be careful that we don't just stick to social media as organizing. And that's something we're seeing right now where people are out on the streets. So one of the dangers of social media is this hashtag activism, right? That you write Black Lives Matter and they're like, yay, I did something. But the reality is that we have to organize every day. Martin Luther King, of course, calls riots the language of the unheard, and then goes on to make that point that it's about resources, it's about jobs. There's no coincidence that these uprisings are happening at the same time as people have lost their job during the pandemic. People, the government isn't sending you any money. They're not continuing your rent. So they have all this money to send the military out in the streets to tear gas people, to send out the National Guard. And they can't give a nurse a mask and she's with a garbage bag taped over her face, It tells you what the priorities of these white supremacist capitalist governments are. And I think a lot of Black people in the streets is people are done with it, and realizing that to continue to beg these systems to see us as human, to beg them for justice, to make small adjustments to the status quo, we'll just get, more Black officers, or they just need more training, as somebody pointed out, the fallacy of training, or whatever it is, this is all intimately tied. Anti-Blackness and capitalism are tied, slavery and racism are tied, right? And we're always at the bottom of those social ladders. So yes, social media helps us share, it helps us get connected, it gives us this communication, but it can't just be our organization. Our organization has to take place at the grassroots, in our communities every day when we're not in crisis. We can't just come out for 3 days and then be like, oh, look, we're taking care of this issue, because the police will always regroup. White supremacy works 24/7, so we have to work 24/7 too.
I want to acknowledge something. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Warren. Go ahead.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge a comment made by, I hope you don't mind me saying your name, but your name is already on the live stream. So Jeremy, and mentioned something about the protests, and something I've been thinking about for the last couple of days. Right now, how the protests in the United States, and sorry if I'm jumping to another topic, but I think it's relevant to discuss this as well. Since I've been watching the protests in the United States, there's a framing of Black people being portrayed as thugs, violent. Donald Trump has tweeted these thugs and the guns will come out. I'm paraphrasing here, and it's very disheartening, and it further positions Black people in a very villainizing way, right? But I will say this, and I really want people to listen to what I'm saying. Don't jump on me yet, people. But I haven't heard any of the protesters who went on CNN or went on any of the news channels say, hey, you know what? We're breaking down these buildings in the name of destroying white supremacist capitalism. What I'm seeing is you have peaceful protesters. You have protesters protesting the right way. Something that Dr. Martin Luther King had mentioned is a nonviolent approach. But you do have protesters out there that are looting, they're stealing, they're picking up the new Yeezys, they're picking up the new Jordans, and then saying that this is because F the police. We have to acknowledge that this protest is there's some are doing it the right way, and some people are not doing it the right way, and they're just demonstrating their emotions. And I understand, but we have to acknowledge that some of these protesters are doing it in a way to line for material gains. And if we don't acknowledge that, we're not critically engaging this conversation or this part of the conversation, which may make some of us uncomfortable, but that's a good thing. And I think when we are uncomfortable enough and open-minded enough, we can actually see eye to eye on many of these topics. But as it stands right now, generally, just to talk about what Jeremy had mentioned, generally right now, these protests is looking like a bunch of thugs out there that are just trying to loot and trying to steal and trying to just break down capitalism. I think if it was mentioned that this protest is to break down white supremacy, which is attached to capitalism, then I'm not promoting violence, people, but I think I see rationale. However, right now we're seeing two sides of the coin that we have to acknowledge as well too, and it could lead to dangerous outcomes for many of us.
Dr. Vibe, if I could.
Go ahead, Cesar.
Donc, d'abord, frères et sœurs, la question posée par Dr. Vibe est quant à savoir ce que nous pensons du rôle des médias sociaux par rapport aux manifestations. So first, to answer in English, I'm going to say this. Social medias, as we're seeing Facebook, Twitter, whichever, Instagram, are the latest methods of communication in relation to technology. Allow me to understand, to explain it properly, that if you look at, for example, since the invention of the printing press with Gutenberg, apparently, when you look at it, very honestly, the 17th century was marked by England having social and civil wars that led to the advent of democracy, and there were violence, rioting, and looting. White people, especially white intellectuals and historians, will not say it when contrasting with Black people protesting and rioting and looting. And in brackets, in Minneapolis, a lot of the people rioting and looting are white, just as in all of the cities. In the 18th century, whether you talk about the 1776 revolt that led to the creation of the United States from Britain, there were rioting, there were looting, there were fires being set. The mainstream media are not going to mention that when they're going to contrast with Blacks protesting for justice and rioting and looting occurs, and there are whites who are also participating in that. In the 19th century, you look at 1848, the year of revolutions all over countries of Europe. They were rioting, looting, and protests. And in the 20th century, you look at, for example, the counterculture, you look at the anti-war movement, there were rioting and looting that led to social advances, social issues advances, and there were also whites who were rioting and looting. The mainstream media are not going to mention that. So when we look at the fact of social media is technology. It is for whatever one see the purposes in it, but it is a step forward. A step forward why? Those who are rioting and looting, and it's being recorded, I'm sorry. People don't just get up and decide to go burn down the Starbucks, the Tim Hortons, or the mom and pop shop down the street. There are socio-economical factors, as Brother Warren was just mentioning. White supremacy goes along with capitalism, which is a result of the Western slave trade of Blacks. We have to mention this. We have to dare having the real conversations. And if these Western/mainstream media want to be honest and have the real conversations, they're going to bring the real Black intellectuals who will dare to call things as they are, instead of always making sure they have the cookie cutter Black people who are going to say they're for the protest, but don't you dare be violent because it makes everyone look bad. No, it doesn't make me look bad because someone decides to riot and loot. Those businesses being looted have insurance. What is the Black people insurance regarding when a white cop murders one of their own? There's no insurance that will bring back Floyd George, that will bring back Sandra Bland, that will bring back Trevor Martin or Tamir Rice or Amadou Diallo or Adama Traoré in France. I can go with so many names, I will get tired. So we have to be aware of that. En français, ce que je viens de dire est tout simplement que les réseaux sociaux ne sont que le dernier modèle de technologie depuis l'invention de l'imprimerie par Gutenberg. Et quand on regarde l'évolution des révoltes et des révolutions, on voit autant au XVIIe siècle les guerres civiles qui ont permis la venue de la démocratie en Angleterre, au XVIIIe siècle, 1776 aux États-Unis, il y avait de la violence, il y avait des vols et des émeutes, tout comme en France, 1789 avec la Révolution française, et au 19e siècle, 1848, où on voit bel et bien dans l'été des révoltes à travers l'Europe, il y avait de la violence, il y avait des émeutes, il y avait des vols, et au XXe siècle, avec la contre-culture et notamment le langage comme instrument du pouvoir, il y avait de la violence et des révoltes, et dans tous ces cas, il y avait des Blancs qui étaient impliqués, mais on contraste toujours cela avec des Noirs qui manifestent pour la justice, et là où il y a du vol, de la violence et du feu, on n'ose pas avoir des Noirs intellectuels pour dire les choses telles que sont, parce que les médias populaires ne vont pas oser faire ce contraste véritable et dénoncer cette hypocrisie des pouvoirs blancs. Pourquoi? Parce que le capitalisme n'est rien de plus que le bras armé, le bras financier de la suprématie blanche, le capitalisme qui est né de la traite des Noirs, de l'esclavage transatlantique. Voilà.
All right. We're going to take a timeout for our panel because the comments are flying like crazy in the comment section. So I'm just going to pull out a few of them, and it's because of my head, not my heart. But I'm just going to pull out some of the comments and plus give our panelists a little bit of a timeout halfway break. Robin says, the book, The Age of Surveillance, Capitalism, explains how Google and Facebook's biz models mean they make more money off videos like the George Floyd murder, as they lead to more engagement. Charlie says the smartphones are allowing for us to see it visually. Often police change the narrative of the story and it becomes he said, she said. With the video footage, you can't change what your eyes see. Jeremy saying, great perspective, Warren, on the gaze of whiteness. Robin DiAngelo goes into the aspect of power and whiteness in her book, White Fragility, which is a very good book. Christina saying, I'm worried this will be a story for the moment and people will just move on. I wonder what else can be done with regards to policy change. We're going to certainly address that before we finish our conversation today. Henri, hail up Henri from California. Social media has just put centuries of oppression on display. It made us more reactionary instead of proactively organizing a plan to fight oppression. Let's go a little bit further. Ava Taylor says they are not protesters, they are agents. I think it's important to stop associating them with protests. Cian has a question. Okay, I'll take that question before we end up, Cian. Jeremy says again, CNN and mainstream media will not interview intellectuals who are out here doing the right thing. It is in the interest of CNN to show the bad. They are paid off entertainment, not actual news. Robin says history shows that if folks weren't burning the blank down and looting, nothing concrete would happen. Remember, Nelson Mandela started blowing things up. So Henri is saying, be careful. There are more white protesters who are looting than blacks. Don't let media outlets fool you. So then we'll stop the halfway break. Kiana says, I would like more elaboration, Mr. Clarke, with regards to your last point about the two sides to the protests. Warren, do you want to go a little bit deeper on that? Are you with us, Warren?
I'm on mute. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry.
So many interviews that you're allowed.
Yeah, so I'm gonna repeat a few things I mentioned, and just to clarify things. And I'll start by saying again, we live in a white settler colonized nation state. That means everything that in our institutions, down to the way how we behave, we think, is through this whiteness. Okay, capitalism specifically. All right. If the protesters, I want to be very clear, okay? And yes, I agree with Robin in mentioning Mandela and his protest and burning the blank down, okay? However, if the protesters or if the protest was positioned to tear down whiteness, which is infused with capital, or capital within whiteness, then 100% tear it down. I have no other thing but to say tear it down. But when we have, and I have another point I want to couple with this, but when we have some people, regardless if it's white, black, it doesn't matter the race right now. I'm not bringing in race just yet. But when we have people stealing things or looting things for material gains and then saying F the police, we need to question that. We need to say, okay, well, what is the motive behind this? All right. The one thing I would like to mention as well is that we need to do, and this is going to be this. I want people to please pay attention to what I'm saying. We need to do a better job in mentoring and to educating our young people. We haven't done a great job in doing that in many spaces. Okay, we have an opportunity to do that right now. We have an opportunity to continue to educate and mentor our young people better, so they can be better than us and get into universities and get into policy change. That's what's going to start helping shift things to some degree, not shift it in its totality, but it's going to shift things to some degree. Now, back to, I tried to send a message to the live comments, but I sent a message to the private chat. I'm hoping maybe Dr. Vibe, you can share that with folks. But there's one video I'm trusting people will see, that when I view this video, the reporter was asking one of the looters, like, why are you breaking into the store? Why are you doing it? And they were saying, yeah, the new Yeezys, the new Jordans, I got them, F the police. Now, that does not speak for all the protesters. No, it doesn't. However, there are some people out there for a different agenda. Not everybody's out there for the same reason. We are seeing, particularly in Minnesota, there are peaceful protesting happening, protesters out there. We've seen it, regardless of CNN, regardless of wherever, we're seeing it. I've seen it. There's many people who are seeing it. So we need to acknowledge there's two different types of protesting happening here, right? Regardless of the race of the people, there are two different protests we have to acknowledge, okay? Now, the one thing, my last point, the reason why we need to acknowledge this is because we don't want to see another young person dead by the police because they are looting or they're protesting in the not so right way, okay? Because right now, if we're noticing what's happening, police cruisers in New York specifically are running over protesters with their trucks. Literally, it's happening right now, right? So we gotta acknowledge that, like if some protesters are doing it the wrong way, they could be hurt or killed, and we don't want that to happen. We just don't want that to happen. So I say this to say that, there's a right way of protesting. And if it's in the way of tearing down capitalism, white settler capitalism, okay, then we need to do that if we're going to change laws, because we can't see another body drop. Like I don't think a few of us can take another situation where a black man or a black woman is killed by the hands of the police. We need to change the system where there's a huge inequality among black people and compared to white people in North America, right? So we just need to acknowledge these things more concretely before we just say, okay, burn everything down.
Can I jump in there?
Yes, go ahead, Elle.
I do want to challenge some of this language around peaceful versus non-peaceful. First of all, looting is when the government gives trillions of dollars to corporations who lay off their workers and give nothing to workers. That's looting. And we've seen that happen during this pandemic. People are being looted constantly. So the notion that a black person stealing shoes is some kind of national news, if that's happening, but corporations stealing billions and trillions of our dollars is just democracy. I don't buy into that. When people start talking about peaceful protesters, we talk about peaceful police. No one's like, go out there and have a peaceful shift. They're the ones killing people. They're the ones committing violence. So I refuse to append the word not peaceful to any protest I'm doing. Like, oh, I'm holding a peaceful protest. Go ask the police about them being peaceful. Ask them about what happens when they bust into the apartment of people called on mental health calls, like they did in Toronto to Regis Korchinski-Paquette, and she ends up 24 floors down on the ground, and they leave her body for 5 hours. And then talk to me about peacefulness. Black people are not the people that are the roots of violence. If Black people want to take some shoes in all of what we're happening after we've endured 500 years of enslavement, centuries of policing, all the resources taken from our communities, I say, F it, take the shoes. I'm not going to create this division where there's bad Black people and good Black people and bad protesters and good protesters. I never thought I'd see a police station burn in my lifetime, and I'm so grateful I saw that burned to the ground. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to go out and burn a police station, because if we're going to do violence, I don't think it's a moral issue. I think it's a strategic issue. And I think we need to have the discussion around how does this strategically fit into our movement. So yes, do we want young people that are facing long arrest records and jail time? What does that mean? What does it mean if people go out and have charges, and how does it affect their life? And we have to strategically think about what that means for the future of Black people. But in terms of a moral issue, burn it all down. This is not our land. We've asked, we've begged, we've gone to meetings, we sit in closed door meetings, we ask people to respect our humanity, we talk about policy, let's do this, let's do that, and it never stops and it never changes. And as long as these people continue, whatever we're doing, it doesn't matter if we're looting, it doesn't matter if we're stealing, because we can be sitting in our apartment and they'll come in the same way. We can be sick and they'll come in the same way. We can be standing in a park and they'll come in the same way. We can be a lawyer, we can be whatever we are. Every Black cop has a story about being harassed and stopped by other cops. Even the ones that are cops get racially profiled by their own so-called blue line brother cops. So the idea that people will spend all this time focusing on the behavior of Black people and no time talking about the daily violence done to us under white supremacy, the deportations, that they continue to make people check in with CBSA while there's a pandemic, because there's always time for that, right? There's always time to finance them, resource the police, but they can't give us anything. So of course people are hitting the streets. And yeah, my only thing is, if I'm telling people to hit the streets, I better be willing to take that myself, and I better be able to keep people in my circle or the group or my crew safe. But as far as a moral issue, property is not more value than Black lives. And the fact that people are crying more about burnt police stations and ruined banks and Targets or Tim Hortons or whatever it is, one Black life is worth a million of all of those things and more. So I think we have to be really careful about engaging in a discourse that is about, like, what is a bad Black person, what is a good Black person, because that discourse always leaves out the working class Black people, the mass of Black people who actually are suffering the spear wedge of the most oppression, the people in prison, the criminalized, the people with mental health issues, the people living on the street. Those are the people that suffer the brunt of policing and then get hit with this, but you're not the right kind of Black person. Oh, well, she didn't talk right when she was on the media. Oh, the mother of Regis, just what she said, so I can't support her, So we do this thing where we discard all these people who are the Black people that are actually suffering the most. So that's why we have to say all Black lives matter and not create these divisions. And when our brothers and sisters are out in the streets for us, if we're not in those streets, I think we have a duty to support them and speak up for them as well.
I agree, and I appreciate everything you're saying, Elle, and I don't want to make this confrontational between you and I. And I want to qualify with something, right? And I think it's important that I'm going to take my time a little slower, say it. I'm not saying that we should not loot. I am not saying we shouldn't burn the mother effer down. What I'm saying is that we need to be very cautious of how we do it, because we do not want to see another Black body on the ground dead. It was very hurtful for me to watch that video, Elle. As you mentioned, you didn't watch it, respectfully, right? What I'm saying is that we're seeing police now driving over Black people, driving over them. We like, there's no, like, how do we now justify to say, okay, now we're now at a point to say we're going to just outright kill get ourselves killed, or more of us killed, for stealing a pair of shoes? I don't, it doesn't register to me. I don't get it. I think, again, if these protests are to bring down white supremacy, then again, burn it all down. I agree with you, Elle. When I saw the police station burning down, 100%, I was like, man, I wish I lit the match. But the point is, we don't want to see any other Black people die. I'll stop it.
Can I jump in very quickly?
No problem, Cesar. Go ahead.
Brothers and sisters, I'm sorry. We can't waste our time regarding this. A protest can easily lead to rioting, and it can lead to, and guess what? It's a human thing. It happens in Asia. It happens in Europe over soccer games. It happens in America over hockey games, over a baseball game, whether the team wins or loses. We have to understand something regarding this very system, which is simply that white supremacy doesn't care that you preach a peaceful message like Dr. Martin Luther King, or that you seem radical like Brother Malcolm X. White supremacy does not care. It will kill you purely and simply because you're a black body, unless they pacify you. And this is part of the reason why you see time and again they will make sure to bring so-called faith leaders to tell people to calm down. Yet at the same time, when they have white riotings, they don't question white leadership, they don't question white parents. And to go even further, elections in the United States, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, accusations of sexual harassment. Where's the accountability? Where's the leadership? Where are all the questions that basically are being asked towards black bodies and black people who have been for decades and centuries protesting against the fate of black people in the US, in Canada, in England, in France, in Brazil, all over the Western world, but also in the Middle East, and as we saw with coronavirus, in China. These are the questions that we must dare to address. Because at the end of the day, no, Brother Warren, you are absolutely right. We don't want to see another black person being killed. But this is beyond yet another black person being killed. Because while we're having this conversation, let's be honest, these police forces clearly know the cops that they have will have an emotional tangent, a temper tantrums, who are borderline murderers and will kill by next week or the next 2 weeks. Those are the real questions that we must address. Those are the real issues that must be there at end. Not the fact that one brother or one sister is going to go loot for the latest pair of Jordans or whichever, because that's a different topic that we must have in our community regarding identity and regarding the matter of priorities for the collectivity. Yes, but let us not get fooled by the mainstream media trying to spin the narrative. And for that, I invite you to look at on YouTube the video White Riots, Black Protests, when the narrative gets switched, how it looks very differently. En français, juste pour dire de manière très claire et très simple, la question qui est posée est par rapport aux émeutes et puis les pillages, qui est tout simplement que le système de suprématie blanche se fout que vous soyez pour les démonstrations pacifiques telles Martin Luther King ou que vous soyez radical tel Malcolm X. À la fin de la journée, il vous dira car vous êtes noir, sauf si vous êtes un de ces noirs qu'ils mettent à l'avant pour pacifier le tout, comme trop de pasteurs, prêtres et imams noirs, alors qu'en fait, eux, ça pille pour des matchs de basket, de hockey, comme de football, et cela arrive en Asie comme partout dans le monde. Et de surcroît, la vraie question, c'est pourquoi ces forces de police gardent des policiers qui ont des dossiers de violence et qui sont prévisibles à causer la mort, notamment de personnes noires comme de personnes autochtones. Là est la vraie question. Et allez sur YouTube pour voir la vidéo White Riots, Black Protests, voir ce qui arrive quand on inverse le narratif par rapport aux manifestations et à l'enjeu racial.
Okay. I don't know if Lesline is with us. I know she's having some internet challenges. Lesline, are you with us? Okay, she's not. So what we're going to do is, first of all, there's too many comments for me. It's just like the live comments, which is a good thing because people are on fire. Our three friends that are still with us, can you stay an extra few moments so we can answer some questions from the audience? Yeah. You good?
Yeah.
Okay. Warren, you're good?
I'm good.
Cesar, you're good?
Always.
Good. All right. Fight the power. I love it. Let's go. So let's have a conversation. What are the effects that you're seeing either personally or with any of your friends of the uplift of what's gone, the intensity? What have you seen either within yourself or seen with other friends and colleagues about what's going on? Because I'm just going to bring up a very interesting point that happened today. I did a Facebook Live to promote this conversation, and there's a lady named Serena who's a member of my community in the United States, and she said, not only are our Black men and women getting killed, but our children. I had to just explain to my son what's happening, and it's so hard. My son asked me, quote, how do you know who's bad mommy before they hurt you?
About the police?
Well, not only the police, but what are you seeing the effects on many Blacks emotionally, psychologically? I was going to ask Lesline because she is a psychotherapist, but I know you're not trained in that discipline, any of you, but what are you seeing out there in your community about the sociological, emotional effects of what's going on?
If I can speak, I mean, I think in some ways, this is the constant state of Black life. And I mean, this is the point. but this is what Afro-pessimists would say, that this is a constant state of social death to be a Black person. So in some ways, it's that accumulated trauma, the post-traumatic slave disorder that we've been experiencing for 500 plus years of our engagements with coloniality. So going back to when Lesline said, no, I wasn't surprised, I was shocked. And that distinction it's never new that Black bodies are treated this way. And we live with this constant drumbeat of Black pain and death. And that's part of Black psychology. So at this time, there's a few questions there. So one is talking to children, and particularly talking to children around police. In my experience of talking to young people, I think a lot of people try to shield young people and don't want to tell these realities to young people. But in fact, then you're not giving them the tools to equip them to move through the world. Often I go and talk to junior high students, and the teachers or whoever are so scared talking about racism. And then when you tell them, yeah, your teacher's are actually racist and your school's effed up, then they actually blossom, because all these things that they've been blaming themselves for not having words for, they actually are relieved to have it named. So I think we shouldn't be scared of being honest with children and telling them stuff like the police are a violent force that's here to terrorize Black communities. And so you may know an individual cop, and it's not that that person's a bad person. We all know good cops, but the point is that cops as an institution exist to harm Black people. They exist to surveil us. They exist to criminalize us. And we can begin having those conversations with children. I think children have every capacity. They're already seeing what's happening. They're already analyzing it. I'm seeing a lot of questions as well on policy on the side, and I wanted to address that because that's a issue that I'm kind of interested in, which is what I'm calling the policy trap, which is we're often then pushed to come up with policy ideas. So you go engage with the police and they're like, well, what's your policy? And my policy is to abolish you. So I'm not going to give you tips on how to sustain yourself as an institution with better policy because I want you gone. So I think that's really interesting for Black people, that that dilemma again of being at the table and we need to produce policy, but does that policy actually get us the goal of liberation? Does saying, oh well, we want more body cameras for the police, does that end police brutality, or do we just see it on camera now and they still get off? Training, we know then they get free training. We can't go to university for free, but the cops can go because they need training to learn to see as human beings. 2-year-olds know not to kill people, but cops and stuff. I just don't buy into that. So I don't really believe in this notion that policy should be our engagement. I think our engagement has to be on this grassroots level, and what we have to have in focus is liberation. Angela Davis tells us to shoot high, because when we don't hit that limit, when we don't hit abolition of the prison or abolition of the police, at least those goals we've been working for, we're going to get something. But if we set our goals low and we're like, oh, we can't dare to ask to end deportations. Oh, we can't say that we want the police defunded. Then all we get is closed door meetings that all they do is delay our community injustice. So for me, and I'm not speaking for everybody else, everybody works differently. Everybody organizes in their own way. We have many lanes and many groups. So I'm not being dictatorial here and saying people have to think or feel this way. I'm saying for me, the more I work, the less I'm interested in doing system-based work, because I don't see how you can work with men who are in prison, suffering these conditions, not just during COVID, but now, and hear from them every day about how their rights are being violated. I'm just hearing from 3 Black guys being held in solitary confinement 64 days in my local jail. And I have no interest in negotiating with the jail around what justice might look like. We liberate them. We do everything we can, and we understand that the jail is always a violent condition. I don't need more Black wardens and more Black guards. I need my Black brothers to be liberated from that space, and I'm going to fight everything I can to push that, however that is. So this is why I think what's happening in the streets is so important. It burst out in Ferguson. It will burst out again. It has burst out before, because this is a 500-year struggle. And yes, we will be temporarily repressed. We all know the police are going to come in. The curfew is going to come in. What's happening now will be squashed because they have that power. But we have the power that we had in Haiti, where we overthrew all 3 major powers in the world using tree trunks as fake cannons, right? We have this ability. And so the burning police station symbolizes this idea that the police operate by terror, and this idea that don't bother fighting us because we have this absolute power. And so burning it down, it's not that it's a sustained action, but it showed us they're human and we can overrun them. And so if we can do that, how else can we organize every day? Sister Lynn's on this chat and a real expert in daily communal organizing. How do you run your meeting in a way that trains people? How do you grow food in your community that sustains people? How do we work for justice together and hold each other accountable? We have to do that work. And then also make sure we're getting out on the streets and getting to every place where government or people in power are and challenge them in force. And that's how we're going to go forward. I believe we will go forward. I don't believe we'll see prisons or police fall in my lifetime, but we will continue. We have to work every day to make that reality. And we can do it in all these ways.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, do you want to add on what sort of effects are you experiencing either personally or with people that you know in your communities?
A lot of people in Ottawa, particularly right now, who I reach out to or reach out to me, are very emotional in terms of they're sad, angry, frustrated, and many of these people who, speaking to them on many occasions and showed, their strength. And I still think they're strong, because if you can be vulnerable, that still shows us part of this, how strong you are. It's really a tough time in being Black right now for many of them. And I say that to then say this, it's a feeling that they've given me where they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel of feeling better. They don't have any faith in the police system in Ottawa. Many of them, they don't see any faith in a lot of the politicians, a lot of the white leaders. So it's a tough time that I don't think we're going to recover anytime soon for many folks. And we need to acknowledge that in terms of how can we start healing these people, our people, and how can we start giving them the supports they need. So it's been a really tough conversations with many people.
Cesar?
Brother Vibe, how can I truly answer you? If we are to be honest, we need to paint the story in which this is happening. The murder of Brother Floyd George is happening in the same world in which it's always easy to look down to the state and say Donald Trump, for example, speaking of Black people as thugs, but at the same time talking of African and Caribbean countries as traumatizing. But this is also the same society in which we have right here in Canada a prime minister by the name of Justin Trudeau, who does blackface last summer, recognizes his racist, apologize, and right away he's forgiven by too many of the Black community. That's too easy. This is also the same society where we basically have France-Afrique, the neo-colonization of African French countries, which is ongoing by France, but it's also where you have in Brazil the largest Black community outside of Africa, where you have someone like Bolsonaro killing Blacks and being proud of it. So Black people have not started being traumatized because of today Floyd George, as yesterday Trayvon Martin, Rodney King, Emmett Smith, Central Park 5. Listen, this is 400 years of ongoing traumatizing in the Western world, but as well since the 7th century, 1400 years of Arab Muslim slave trade and ongoing racism. So we have to take a chance, as you were asking regarding notably children, we have to educate our children to the truth of what it is to be Black. We must dare to not just be Black of skin, but be Black of mind. Allow me to remind you all, Jewish children are taught from a young age about the reality of being Jewish regarding anti-Semitism and regarding the Holocaust, so that they form better, stronger, united communities that are notably centered on the matter of identity and knowing that as back in the 70s, we were calling each other brother and sisters. How is it that we are here, notably with entertainment and toxicity, calling each other, excuse my language, niggers, bitches, and sluts? We must boycott those who keep pouring toxicity in our Black families, in our Black relations, in basically the fact that our children, as I see when I go to schools, to conferences on racism, our Black children have inferiority complex issues that become even worse when they see that the very society that tells them if you work hard you can succeed, but then they see white cops getting away with killing Black bodies, they see white politicians getting away with insulting Black people, they see time and time and time and again the reminder that Black lives does not matter. En français, très brièvement, la question étant de savoir comment est-ce que l'on voit autour de nous, dans nos communautés, le ressenti par rapport à toute cette situation. J'ai développé le fait que c'est la même société dans laquelle Donald Trump traite mal les Noirs, appelle les pays Ici, au Canada, un premier ministre comme Trudeau qui a fait du blackface, s'en est excusé et a été trop vite pardonné. Au Brésil, Bolsonaro qui tue les Noirs, comme en France, Macron et la France-Afrique. Et donc, il faut voir qu'il y a un traumatisme perpétuel des Noirs au niveau de l'Occident depuis 400 ans, mais tel dans le monde arabo-musulman depuis 14 siècles. Et donc, toujours cette société qui dit que tu peux y arriver en travaillant fort, mais toujours ce renfermement, ce renforcement du message que la vie noire ne vaut pas grand-chose, notamment quand un policier blanc échappe à la justice pour avoir tué des Noirs.
All right, thanks very much. So we've reached the top of the hour, and our friends have been kind enough to give us some extra time. And I'm going to ask our panelists if you can pull stuff out from the chat section, which is on fire right now. I'm going to pull out some things. So first, I have a question here from the audience. Lynn asks, what should modern day organizing look like and for what results?
Said Sister Lynn should be answering that. Can we get an answer from Lynn? I think I'll ask that just because I know Lynn, and then people can jump in. So I've actually learned most of what I know from organizing from Rocky, and then from Lynn, and then from other elders and people around the community. I also see Sylvia, Paris, and Bernadette on this chat. So shout out Nova Scotia, historic Nova Scotia, African Nova Scotians who have been holding it down in this country, so-called country, for hundreds of years as liberated people. So leading the way in liberation, shout out to them. But yeah, so I think what I've learned from Lynn and learned from Rocky. So first of all, I think everybody was very hands-on. When I was very young, Rocky came and really put hands around me, and he would see young people and identify them. So I think we really need to do that work of holding up young people who are organizing, giving them the knowledge and teaching them what it means to organize. I'm very lucky that just by sitting there, I could see these clinics and understand that, like, when you watch Lynn run a meeting, the meeting is organized. She doesn't do it willy-nilly and everyone comes in the room. It's pre-planned. There's hours of planning. She'll put fabric on chairs to make the room look African, So these kind of things our elders know how to do about creating space and how to listen to people and how to deal with opposing viewpoints. And that's organizing work. So we do that work daily. And then when we come into crisis, we have the structure to say, now we're already together. And that's the point of organizing, right? As Stokely called it, organize, organize, organize. It's not the good times. It's you organize in the downtime. So when you need that, you've built those structures. And that's something I really, really learned from people, particularly the Black women around me. I think organizing is like making sure the kids in your community have breakfast, and maybe you just give out granola bars from your house. That's building a relationship, and then those kids are coming to your house and you can have these conversations with them about policing or racism in schools. Organizing is taking those calls from prison every day so they know that you will pick up. And then again, like, you're in relation with people and their families. So I think we really have to do that relational work as Black people. And most importantly, we have to listen to our elders. We have a lot of focus on young people, and young people bring the spirit and energy. They bring new ideas. They're the ones that are fearless. They're the ones that will step right to the cops in the streets. But our elders have this broad wisdom of what it means to work in community and what that long-term organizing looks like. And I think a lot of modern organizing, what's dangerous about it is people don't reach back to that. So they think that the protest is a thing in itself. Like, we come out to a protest and we march and we did our thing. And I'm like, the protest is an expression. It's a form of communication and presence. But before that and after that, there's so much stuff that has to go into it. So if we look at Regis Kaczynski, we had we had a protest in Toronto and one here, but is anybody feeding the family? Is anybody making sure that that family doesn't have to sit in that apartment and look at where their daughter died? Have we funded to get them into a hotel? Have we helped them live the day-to-day? And if we're not organizing as community to hold that community close, and the people in her building probably are, right? But then as broader protesters or broader organizers, we always have to think about that. We can't just hold up a case or hold up a moment and get all hype and George Floyd, and then when we all leave, his family's still coping, or whatever it is, this deportation case or this wrongful conviction case, right? So for me, it's like you do the prep, and then when you need it in crisis, you're ready. But so I really, again, I wish Lynn could speak and just jump in, because Lynn is an actual masterclass in organizing on every day, and she knows I honor and respect her to death. But I think it's our elder Black women that have so much of this knowledge and can lead us forward.
Gentlemen, you want to add to that?
Again, I was talking with my mute button on. I don't know how it turned on that time. Yeah, Elle, thank you for that. And I would like to acknowledge Black men too. Black men have knowledge to offer, as much like Black women. And I think, and I mentioned it earlier, not sure if people caught on that or not, but we need to, just maybe echoing a lot of what's been said about young people, we need to, hold ourselves accountable to mentor, educate, and inspire our young people. We need to do that. When we do that, we'll have better outcomes. We'll have more educated, more young people who have a foundation, and more young people will have the opportunity to get themselves, or to make, considering the opportunity exists, to have an opportunity to work in places where they can create change for the younger people coming up after them, right? So we need to do better in doing that. We need to not only acknowledge our young people coming, we need to appreciate, and we need to acknowledge our young people who are going through, the school systems are going through right now, and who are, finding tough times. For instance, Ottawa, there's a lot of Black young people just starting out in their undergrad degree and facing tremendous and very uncomfortable anti-Black racism situations, which is going to take them off their ways of obtaining that bachelor, just a bachelor. And for those who want to do a master's, if they can't get to a bachelor, it's going to be next to impossible getting a master's degree. So we need to not only mentor and encourage, but we need to support. We need to show up, and we need to not just walk talk the talk, but we need to walk the walk when it comes to our young people.
Cesar, anything you want to add?
In order to answer this question, basically you're inquiring in terms of solutions and where we go from here. I need to really state this, which is very important. As a Pan-Africanist, I don't want to say necessarily thank you, but respect to those whites who are standing up, who are protesting in the streets, who are basically, and notably here, I'm going to give a call to the white mothers who are giving birth to mixed children to get more involved in terms of the consciousness and identity of the children, yes. But to answer truly, I have to mention what I call, and that I'm going to develop in my book to come, the three cancers of the Black psyche in terms of entertainment, consumerism, and religion, that basically become central to understand why the process of integration has us walking away from activism and from standing up truly when we say we're Black and proud, beyond the fact of a fiction like Wakanda. And therefore, for us to go into advancing the 5 elements that are necessary to advance our communities. And please don't think I'm just here talking theoretical work. This is very truthful. Addressing the schooling of our children. Brother Warren Clarke was saying it notably. The schooling of our children from a young age regarding their identity and the potential in terms of coming together for the community. We have schools, banks that we must address regarding our own money, such as the notion of buying Black and supporting Black-owned businesses and entrepreneurs such as our sister Sophia Jacob. We also must address many other elements, and by many other elements, I'm talking as well hospitals where healthcare and racism is very strong, of course, but also our food sources. Our food sources, when we see our brothers and sisters in the US becoming victims of disproportionately of COVID-19. So where I see all of this coming in terms of these all of these elements being combined together is the fact of we must dare to recognize that in terms of the solutions to come, we can't be there waiting for a government. We can't be there waiting for more white people to stand up against racism. It has to come from us, from our organizations, and daring to come together instead of dividing ourselves into white Arab religions of Christianity and Islam. We're dividing ourselves into politics of liberal and conservatives, which really make no difference towards us when they come in power, and other differences, but coming together, Black men and Black women, beyond any ethnicity, ideological, whatever differences, and from there, daring to stand up to impose our respect, because this is what it's really about when we see the behavior of these murderous cops who don't go murder Jewish people, no Chinese people. It's very important that we dare to speak truly to what is actually going on, and that we do know, but too many of us are afraid to speak truthfully. très brièvement en français, par rapport à la question qui est posée en termes de solutions et comment voir les solutions, j'ai mentionné le fait de ce que je considère les 3 cancers du psyché noir, qui sont le divertissement, le consumérisme et la religion, nous menant dans un processus d'intégration qui nous éloigne d'un activisme réel de nos héros tels Martin Luther King et Malcolm X. Et en ce sens, nous devons nous focuser à développer des institutions centrées sur l'individu noir au travers de nos écoles pour l'éducation de nos jeunes, nos banques par rapport à notre entrepreneuriat et notre force financière, telle de nous soutenir les uns les autres, mais également au niveau des hôpitaux, également au niveau de notre force productrice en matière d'alimentation de nourriture, pour centrer le tout sur une identité noire et réelle et concrète qui nous permet d'imposer le respect et non de mendier un soutien de blancs alliés, mais également d'éviter d'attendre que des gouvernements démontrent une pitié ou une empathie par rapport à nous, qui ne sont pas des solutions. La solution aux enjeux des Noirs viendra des Noirs et par notre conscience collective, our collective consciousness.
Okay, in lieu of time and too many comments, we're gonna start doing some rapid fire stuff. And Al, you mentioned Lynn Jones. She says in the comments here, document. Create.
Yeah, she's also shouting out her own archive, the
Yes.
Lynn Jones archive that she kept since she was 8 years old. Just all the articles on Black people, and it's archived at St. Mary's University. So any person can do this. Like, just save like those wedding announcements and leaflets and stuff, because they tell our history, right? And we know that our history has been erased. So I think what Lynn's archive shows is you don't have to be an archivist or a trained librarian or an academic to do this kind of work in community, like archival work and saving our records, or be a community historian.
So in lieu of time, what I'm going to do is folks, I won't be able to get all the questions out, but what I'm going to do is get as many in as I can. I'm going to ask one person from the panel to respond instead of all of them. So first question I'm going to give is going to go to Warren. Warren, This question is from Sarah from Ottawa. She asked, how do we defund white supremacy to at least hinder its financial ability to oppress?
Well, one thing we have to do is we have to support black businesses. We got to support ourselves. When I hear that question, the first thing that comes to mind is Black Wall Street. You know what I mean? And that was, if people, Black Wall Street was years ago, was burned down by white supremacy or white supremacists in 1902. Don't quote me on the year, I may be a little bit off. Needless to say, that's an example of creating our own capitalist system which supports blacks, and we need to get back to that some way, somehow. I don't have all the answers for that today, and I know it's going to be a short response because we're running out of time, but it's really important that we support not only our business, we support our initiatives. We try to give ourselves a chance to step up on this ladder of success, so that we can defund white supremacy or begin to, because a lot of it, what we do is we put our monies into the hands of whites for their products or services. So we need to start engaging in ourselves and trusting in the value of our own products and services, which would start. There's one thing I actually wanted to mention as well, and there was a question that was, I think it was, really quickly, not Jax. Oh, I'm so sorry, Jeremy. The one thing I want to acknowledge too is the labor power of black folks doing this work. There is a tremendous stress on many of us to do above and beyond in comparison to white bodies or white people. White people, they'll work 8 hours a day and get the job done. On our side, we have to work 12, 24 hours, some of us, just to get the job done and support our communities. So it's really important to acknowledge our labor power, and knowing that there's a huge strain on many of us that are doing above and beyond, and we need to support each other. And we need to, and one ways of doing that is to pay it forward to our young and giving them the tools so they can be successful. I'm very biased in saying this one thing, is that I teach at both the college and the university level, and it's a great experience. However, You know, I'm a little bit biased in trying to push more Black folks, Black youth to university, you know, so they can understand social, you know, the language, so they can understand, you know, policy, so they can understand different ways of communicating with others in the social world. So it's really important that we not only acknowledge where we're at, acknowledge how much, you know, strain we're putting on ourselves, because that is going to impact our mental health, and we need to acknowledge it as well. But also we have to multiply more of us to be educated and have a strong foundation to do the necessary work for success for all of us.
Fantastic. So our next conversation piece goes to Elle. How can Black people and their supporters activate policy change?
So there's this thing, I think it's Howard Zinn that says this, and he says it doesn't matter who's sitting in the government, it's who's sitting in at the lunch table. I mean, the lunch counter, right? And the point he's making there is that these things come from bottom up. I think one of maybe the things that we get too invested in as Black people is we really believe in this power of Black faces in high places, you know, that all we need is a Black president or a Black prime minister, and then things will come along with that. But we actually know that's not true. I mean, and no shade on the actual people, but, you know, we've had to fight deportations when we had a Black immigration minister. So we know that just having people in power, they don't have the power to change the whole system. But that change comes from below. So an example I'll give that's concrete is COVID-19. Obviously, as a prison abolitionist, someone who doesn't believe in prison and wants to liberate people, when that pandemic started and we were like, we need to get people out, all of a sudden, because it was a health crisis and affected people that just weren't in the jail, provincially, we got 50% of our population out. That was something we were told could never happen. Oh my gosh, people can't serve sentences in the community. And then when there was a crisis, all of a sudden, this thing we were told couldn't happen, happened. So now our job is to keep pushing from that and say, you don't need to return people to jail. We can do this in our communities. So we know that when the pressure's on and when there's crisis, we can find the will. Politicians respond to being shamed. If we all stood up and said, you know, this just isn't happening, it wouldn't happen. If people in North Preston surrounded the police station and just didn't let the cars in, eventually something would happen. It's just we have to be in a position to sustain that, to be relentless, to be fearless. And of course, there's so many other things going on. We have families, we have mortgages to pay, people have jobs. It's a lot to put our bodies on the line. It's a lot to ask from Black people. But change comes from the bottom up. So if we want policy change, I don't think it's accomplished by closing the doors and a few select few sitting in a meeting with like this politician, and then the rest of the community never hears about it. I think it's accomplished by, those of us who are blessed and privileged in education need to go and share that education with people that maybe can't go to school. But that doesn't mean they can't read. I've done reading circles with guys in prison who are reading Fanon and reading Angela Davis and reading all kinds of texts and talking about it, or sharing it with each other if other people can't read. So we can share knowledge with people outside of universities and classrooms and make sure it gets to people, and we're training them, because our greatest Black minds for 500 years have been dedicated to the cause of teaching us how to fight colonialism, right? We can get there together and make sure we're organizing working class people, setting up tenancy boards to people that are being evicted and making sure we show up and don't let it happen. In Winnipeg, Indigenous people are like literally showing up at hospitals and preventing social workers from taking babies from moms and saying, you're not doing this. We can do that as Black people. You're not taking another child from our community. It's not happening. And we will set something up. And when we do those things, like the policy has to change, because we will not allow it to be otherwise. So I think the key is, and I know this was rapid fire and I gave a long answer. Sorry, organization is like, you can't get a short answer. But basically, I think we have to, again, organize from the ground up, and that will lead to the policy change, because then people will recognize that the ways they oppress us are unsustainable. We're not accepting being evicted. So you better change a policy that favors landlords, because none of us are having it. And every time you try to evict one of us, you're going to deal with 100 of us or 1,000 of us, and you're going to deal with all of us online. And we're not going to stop. I'm going to show up. Robin is on this chat. You know what they're doing in Ottawa with the school trustees, and they're just not accepting that this racist trustee is going to still be a trustee. So they're like, you guys can't speak to the meeting. And they're like, oh, really? And they're fighting it, right? And if you don't give up, and if you will fight 24/7, and if you will stand your ground, in my experience, that is where change happens. But we just have to be willing, and we have to stop saying, oh, we can't do these things, and we need the numbers. So we just have to stop accepting it. Bottom line, we have to understand that we are not being victimized because of our behavior. Whatever we do, police aren't going to, it's not like if I act nice, police will stop being mean, right? Like Black people have to stop believing that we are causing the things that are happening to us, that we are criminalized because we are somehow bad. These things are white supremacy acting, and we need to start supporting each other as much as we can every day, show up, give presence, and that will change things. So the changes with, I hate to sound neoliberal, like I don't mean the changes with us in this airy way, I mean it in a very concrete way, that every time we see injustice happening in our community, we need to show up and speak up and not give up for each and every one of us. and then it will be unsustainable for them to continue to have to pour resources into suppressing us.
Okay, Cesar, your question. How do we ensure that we continue the protests that honor our horror at the deaths of our sisters and brothers, and yet not lose sight of dismantling the systems and structures that are the frame/foundation that allow injustices to thrive?
My brother, Dr. Vibe, that's an excellent question. Thanks for giving it to me. I could write a book to answer this question, but I'll make it very short time-wise. Listen, we need to go beyond the notion of protesting and beyond the notion of hashtag protesting. We need to basically address ourselves. I mean, I'm really sorry to say this. I may sound redundant, but truthfully, when we look at the communities that the police is not killing, and I've named them, the Jewish and Chinese communities, what is it that we tend to see? The dollar circulates far longer among them than before it goes out. That's not the case in the Black community. We have a nature of entertainment that basically tends to portray stereotypes among us where Blacks are only celebrated in sports and music. We basically have a people, a Black race that demands to be respected, that demands to be treated as equals, and yet every Friday as every Sunday, we go pray to the religions of our slave, the slave master and the colonized master, thinking they're going to respect us as equals. We become non-credible and incoherent. As such, Wakanda must not just be a fiction, it must be a reality in which we dare, as I was saying earlier, we dare to be Black, not just of skin, but Black of mind. Black of mind in the very same spirit as Brother Martin Luther King was becoming more radical before he got killed. Remember, 1963, I Have a Dream, don't judge by the character, not by the skin color. White people understood that as color blindness. I don't see color. He realized his error. Therefore, 1968, before dying, Black is Beautiful, addressing the fact that every Western language and even Arabic are fundamentally racist towards Black people. It is absolutely truthful. And right here in Ontario, 2 years ago, when Premier Ford announced, said that he didn't want to fund anymore the Francophone University, how did the Franco-Ontarians, how did they call it? Jeudi Noir, Black Thursday. This reinforces the notions of our inferiority. Therefore, for us to stand, we must stop begging for an acceptance and an integration. As you see me right now with my traditional Sawa hat of my ethnicity in Cameroon, I give video conferences like this. I give training to public servants like this. I have meetings with police in traditional outfits. I dare to speak that Black truth with the CEO of our organization, your Black community organization, Roots and Culture Canada, CEO Ketsia Peters, will dare to be truthful, and those will know us and will stand with us, such as Sister Sophia Jacob, Brother Richard Sharp, Sister Sarah Onyengo. They know when Cesar is there, Cesar speaks the truth, not because I think I'm all that, or I think I know everything, or I think I'm right, but because if we don't dare to say it, we will say it. This is where the truth becomes important in terms of never losing sight of what we are here to stand, but the system reacts. This is something important Black people have to understand. Whiteness as a construct is a history of violence. I can give you a history of violence of whiteness from ancient Greece, when they said democracy, but all women were slaves to the husband and 50% of the population were just slaves. To ancient Rome with the revolts that they had, to the Middle Ages, and so. This is taught. This is not me making it up. Whiteness is a social construct rooted in violence and power relations, and as such, in order to be able to reply properly to it, you have to know where you are and to stand true to your identity instead of begging for acceptance, begging to be at a table where you basically will eat the scrums on all four on the floor. So this is where we have to recenter on ourselves. This is why I'm a Pan-Africanist. This is why I speak not with a passion as some type of militant, but because our people, our children must know this truth. Before we had this meeting, I had the honor of speaking to a very intelligent young teenager, black 12-year-old girl, to whom I said, the Nike Air Force One that you wish to have, take that money, put it in the bank, and with your parent invested in stock, in technology, it will be far more fruitful than to enrich Nike. These are the conversations we must have to our children, because that 12-year-old girl already had knowledge of her identity, of her roots, and as such, we must create the environment and nurture that environment that will basically make it that this 12-year-old will become that adult who will be a leader in the community, a leader in a family, and basically more and more and more of our children will dare to stand up as equal to white, Jewish, and Asian children in terms of respect me, because if you don't, there will be consequences. This is the truth that we must bring. Très brièvement en français, la question étant par rapport à ce que l'on peut faire par rapport à ceci et comment on peut envisager le futur de sorte à protester mais toujours garder en focus les priorités. J'ai tout simplement dit le fait que ce n'est pas vraiment une question de protester mais de se recentrer sur notre identité et en ce sens, oser nous débarrasser de cette prioritisation du divertissement, du consumérisme qui n'est autre qu'un produit du capitalisme et de religion importer christianisme et islam qui viennent des maîtres d'esclaves et des colons alors qu'on veut être traité comme égal et en ce sens de se concentrer par rapport à nous-mêmes, à nos identités. Et pour finir, j'ai donné l'exemple d'une fille de 12 ans à qui j'ai dit de ne pas aller gaspiller son petit argent dans des Air Force One et enrichir Nike, mais plutôt avec ses parents, d'investir cela à la banque au niveau de stock en technologie pour le futur. Pourquoi? Car cette jeune fille a déjà une conscience identitaire de ses racines et donc de créer pour nous, adultes, un environnement dans lequel nos jeunes peuvent grandir, se tenir debout, imposer le respect et faire comprendre aux autres que si tu ne me respectes pas, il y aura des conséquences réelles. C'est ainsi que nous allons nous tenir debout et garder le focus sur les priorités.
All right. Well, folks, that's it. We could go on for all day. That's it. But I respect everyone's time. But this was out of bounds, folks. I'm going to apologize, and I apologized a few moments ago. There's some questions we couldn't get to, but everyone seemed to be asking for a part 2. So offline, we're going to ask all our participants if they can make some time for a part 2, because it seems that family out there are loving you guys. So the comments are just flying. So what I'm going to ask, you got 1 minute. 1 minute. So we're gonna leave Elle to last this time. I want Cesar, Warren, and then Elle closing comments and how people can contact you. So Cesar, you're first.
Very simply, thank you so much for the opportunity, brothers and sisters. The honoring of brother George Floyd, just as Amo Abori, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, Abdirahman Abdi, Adama Traore, so many names you can name. The honoring of them is true Pan-Africanism. This here is seen the same on the 4 corners of the world. So the differences that we create are empty, are valueless. Let us come together. Let us work together. Let us support one another. It's not about the leader in terms of who has the biggest head or who. No, it's about us coming together, respecting our Black women, respecting young brothers and sisters, addressing mental health in the Black community, stopping the misogyny and the homophobia in the Black community, and notably, centering on our children and ending the toxicity of the nigger culture, bitch, hoes, and stuff. We have to end that for our seriousness, just as we have to throw away Jesus, Muhammad, and all that foreign bullshit. Seriously, that's what it is. We have to say it as it is. Très brièvement, en commentaire de fermeture, c'est tout simplement de revenir par rapport à nous-mêmes et d'oser être noir au-delà de la peau, mais dans les esprits, et en ce sens, de nous centrer sur le fait qu'on doit construire des communautés fortes, on doit investir dans nos hommes noirs, nos femmes noires, les respecter, adresser la santé mentale dans les communautés noires, tout comme également mettre fin à l'homophobie dans les communautés noires, car aux quatre coins du monde, on est noir d'abord et avant tout, et donc se débarrasser des éléments toxiques tels une culture de s'appeler nègre ou négro et d'insulter nos femmes, et au même sens se débarrasser des Jésus et des Allah, ce genre de choses qui font en fait qu'on n'est jamais vu et respecté comme des égaux. Dans notre identité et notre force, c'est là où est la force du panafricanisme.
Merci, Cesar. Next up, Warren Clarke. You're on mute, Warren.
Just trying to appreciate and respect people when they talk. So I'm not on. Okay, let me get to my point here because you know what I mean. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate Dr. Vibe. Really appreciate you putting this together. Richard Sharp and other organizers. Sorry if I'm not mentioning your name, but I trust this panel inspired many, if not all of you who watched, and I trust that you will take this information. If it's new information, please share it. If you already know this information, please share that with people that could benefit from it. It's really important that we continue to empower ourselves, we continue to educate ourselves. It's important that we continue to love ourselves. And not only just saying it, but showing it. Okay, doesn't mean go and kiss somebody in the mouth. No. But I mean showing appreciation and showing that you care for the well-being of the person who looks like you or has the same color as you, regardless of whatever intersection they come from, queer, straight, cisgender, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, at this point. We need to take care of ourselves, we need to love ourselves, and we need to educate ourselves. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. I'm humbled for being on this panel, and we'll see if there's a part two.
There will be. How can people get in touch with you, Warren? If you're
yes. If you need to get in touch with me, you can email me at Warren G. Clarke, like Warren G. Regulators. All right. So Warren G. Clarke, Clarke with an E, at gmail.com. Or you can visit my website, warrenclarke.ca. I will not give you my phone number, so that's not going to happen.
Because that finds it out anyways.
Or you can visit my Facebook page, Warren Clarke. I think I'm easy to find spot on Facebook. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Cesar, we did not get contact information from you. If you're willing to share it quickly.
Honestly, the easiest way, thank you very much. My Facebook, Cesar Rimi Emery Moussa. The name is very simple, Cesar Rimi. You will find me. Many people will find me. I'm basically 1 or 2 click friends away.
All right, fantastic. Elle, round it out for us.
So to close off, first of all, thank you, Dr. Vibe. What you're doing here is organizing as well. This is political, right? To create space for Black people that is controlled by Black people. So thank you so much for that work that helped us to organize. And everyone in the chat, I didn't shout out everybody. I was shouting out the Nova Scotians, but I see other people. So thank you so much, all. There's a whole nother level of conversation going on in the chat. So that's great to see as well. So thank you. The last thing I guess I'll close with is I think our challenge as Black people, we don't all have to like each other. We're not all going to like each other. White people don't like each other and they disagree all the time. That's called political parties. So sometimes as Black people are like, oh, we have to unify and we think that means we have to like or get along with everybody. We don't have to. But when it's time, we have to be able to organize and work together. And I think that's our biggest challenge is principled disagreement. Some of us are on the left, some of us are more centrist, some of us, we don't share a lot of political beliefs. I don't know anybody that I share 100% of beliefs with. So we have to be able to disagree and debate. And we had some arguments here. Not everyone agrees on everything, but at the end of the day, we know that our interests as a people lies in us being able to work together. So that doesn't mean giving away our principles. It means that every day we have integrity. But when it's time to come together, we can disagree, we can, speak up, we can argue with each other, we can scream at each other if we have to, but then we have to be able to march forward together. So it's a challenge I work on in my own life. There's a lot of people, I get mad at things all the time, but I think, we can't be scared of disagreement. We can't be scared of fighting, like those kind of things in our community. We don't all have to be on the same page, but all we have to do is move forward together and know that my life as a Black person is dependent on everybody else's life as a Black person, and not one of us is free until we all are free.
And where can people get in touch with you?
I have a Facebook, but I'm over the friends limit. But if you catch it on the day where white people have defriended me, El Jones on Facebook, Halifax Network. You can email me at el.jones, my name. So el.jones@msvu.ca, like Mount St. Vincent University.ca. yeah, that's probably it. I'm not on Twitter. You can find me through either St. Mary's University or Mount St. Vincent University if you need my email. And yeah, otherwise hit somebody up who knows me and they'll give you my contact.
I didn't know that anybody could hit the maximum friend list. Wow, so that's the first. I didn't know that could happen, but you know,
it's not that good. They need to expand it.
Okay. That's good. Well, folks, we will produce a replay of this conversation on the Dr. Vibe Show website, and I'll list all the contact information that everyone has shared here. Folks, that's it for part 1, but you are demanding a part 2, so we're going to make that happen. I'd just like to close out with a few things. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who watched or listened to this live on the replay. Much appreciated, not taken for granted. I'd like to thank our friends on the panel. I'd like to thank Cesar. I'd like to thank Warren. I'd like to thank Elle and Lesline. Her internet connection, it wasn't the greatest, but we'll get her for the next conversation. I'd like to also thank some other people who made this conversation happen. Sophia Jacob was the lady who brought this idea to me, so thank you very much. Richard Sharp, who helped me coordinate this with Sophia, the UNDPAD Push Coalition, the Black Ottawa Business Network, BIA Media, who produced this great, crazy, wonderful conversation. So I'd like to end out with these things. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. I'd like to thank everyone who watched this, and keep a watch. The way you heard about this conversation, you will hear about part 2. God bless, peace be well, and My Heritage, we like to say, walk good, but also walk safe. Good night, everybody.